America's Book Club is brought to you by these television companies and is supported by the Ford Foundation. From the nation's iconic libraries and institutions, America's Book Club takes you on a powerful journey of ideas, exploring the lives and inspiration of writers who have defined the country, in conversation with civic leader and author David Rubenstein.
As a young boy growing up in Baltimore, I went to my local library and was inspired to read as many books as I could. Hopefully people will enjoy hearing from these authors, and hopefully they'll want to read more.
Now, from the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C., a best-selling author with more than 40 million books in print, whose novels include The Storyteller, 19 Minutes, and her latest, By Any Other Name, Jodi Picoult.
Folger Shakespeare Library is the largest repository of Shakespeare's works, even though it's in the United States. And there are first folios, roughly 235 first folios, 82 of them are at the Folger Shakespeare Library. And the relevance of that is that Jodi Picoult has just written a new book about the possibility that Shakespeare may not have written all of his works and that maybe a woman actually wrote some of those works. So can you describe why you think that and how you came about that theory and why you wrote a book about it?
Absolutely. So I fell in love with Shakespeare when I was an English major in college. And what did I love about Shakespeare? Nobody wrote women the way the Shakespearean plays did. Beatrice and Portia and Rosalind and Kate were so three-dimensional. And I absolutely loved the richness of those female characters. And when I was in college, I had a professor who spent, all of 30 seconds talking about the authorship question and whether Shakespeare actually wrote them. And like every other English major, I was like, oh, well, that's ridiculous. Of course he did. And I didn't think about it for years. And then I was reading an article by Elizabeth Winkler in The Atlantic in which she was talking about the authorship question. And she pointed out that Shakespeare had two daughters that survived through childhood. And he taught neither of them to read or write. And it literally just stopped me in my tracks. And I thought, there is no way the same guy who created those incredible female characters would not have taught his own daughters how to read and write. And I decided to follow this deep dive that Elizabeth did. I had heard about a lot of male authorship candidates, from Christopher Marlowe to Francis Bacon to the Earl of Oxford, but I had never heard of Amelia Bassano, who is the one that Elizabeth talked about in this essay. And the more that I dove into Amelia's life, the more I realized that all the gaps that academics have tried to twist Shakespeare's life together to fit were seamlessly filled by Amelia's life. And I started to think that there was a very good chance that she possibly could have had something to do with the writing of some of those plays.
So did you research this, or you just speculated since you're a fiction writer?
So much research. I mean, I do research for all my books, and it drives me crazy as a reader when someone gets something wrong. So I do months and months of research, and that's what I did for this book. I talked to Shakespearean scholars, I talked to people at the Globe, I talked to I read the original primary source documents at the Ashmolean. Everything that I could get my hands on, I researched, and I began to piece together a whole outline of her life and how it intersected with the publication dates of the Shakespearean plays.
You came to the conclusion that it's not impossible that she could have been a writer of some of Shakespeare's work.
Absolutely. I truly believe that.
Okay, so once you came to that conclusion, you used that as a premise for a fiction work, is that right?
Yes.
So this is something you've done before, which is you do a lot of research, and then you write a novel that deals with often a complicated social subject. Here, not that complicated, but it is unusual in the sense that most people think Shakespeare wrote the plays himself. If he didn't write them, probably another man wrote them. That's the conventional wisdom.
Yeah, but this, I would argue and say there is a bigger context here. To me, this is a novel about how women have been written out of history by the men who were holding the pen, and how that's not something that just happened in the 1500s, it's happening today.
Okay, so when did you start that book?
Oh gosh, I think I started it in 2022.
Is that your most recent book?
Yes.
Okay, and what it's called?
By Any Other Name.
By Another Name. And so when you start writing a book, you come up with an idea. Very often there, as a fiction writer, you're not obligated to do a lot of research. Some fiction writers say, look, I kind of make it up as I go along.
Not me.
But that's not your style. So you do a lot of research, and then after you do the research, you come up with an interesting premise but the premise is designed to get people to think about the social subject you have in mind. So in this case, it is that women deserve better credit for
Yes.
some of the things that were done in that era than they were given. Is that right?
Yes, and today, because the other half of this book follows the very fictional descendant of Emilia Bassano, who has written a play about her her ancestor and is moving in the Broadway community, which happens to be a very kind of patriarchally based, male-dominated world. And she also cannot get her words in front of the public. And so just as I suggest that Emilia paid William Shakespeare for the use of his name in order to see her words on a stage, I question whether this fictional descendant might do the same just to get her words on a stage.
So if your theory proved to be correct, and someday maybe we could prove it through artificial intelligence or something, would you think better of Shakespeare because he was smart enough to use a woman, or less of Shakespeare because he actually didn't tell the truth that he was using a woman?
I think that's a great question. I give Shakespeare a lot of credit. I think he was an extraordinary businessman, and there's so much proof of that. And so I think this was like a little cottage industry for him. I don't think Emilia was the only person writing these plays. I think the Earl of Oxford was involved. I do think that there were multiple playwrights who were writing different kinds of plays. I think Oxford did a lot of the history ones, actually. But there are certain ones that I really do think have Emilia's fingerprints all over them.
Now, you have invented a genre, I guess I would say invented it, which is to take a socially complicated subject. It could be gender equality, it could be reproductive rights, whatever it might be, and you write a novel about it to try to bring out the point that maybe society isn't looking at the issue correctly. Is that fair?
I think that's very fair, although I would argue that I didn't invent it. I think like Jane Austen and Dickens might have something to say
All
about
right,
that.
let's say you perfected it.
Okay, that's good, yeah.
All right. I perfected it because you've now been doing this for how many years?
Oh, 35?
And how many books have you sold?
I think it's like 14 million.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I don't think anybody else has done as many in this kind of genre. So well, one of the things I was curious about in talking with you is to figure out why you decided to do so much research. Can't you fake it and you pretend you do some of the research? Why do you, I mean, for example, you wrote about elephants. Did you go to Africa to?
Yes.
And,
Yeah, I went to Botswana and I worked with elephant researchers. Yeah.
Okay, and you concluded elephants are smarter than maybe people even think they are.
Maybe even smarter than some people, but yeah. I mean, what I actually said was that I think elephants have an emotional resonance and a cognitive sense that we usually don't attribute to animals. And they also really, elephants never forget. They really do hold grudges for years.
So you wrote a book about somebody who lived with wolves.
Yeah,
And
I interviewed a guy who lived with wolves. Yep.
And is that safe to do that?
Absolutely not.
All right, and what about Alaska? Did you go to Alaska?
I did. I went to Alaska, and I went to Alaska in January to a place called Akiak. You have to fly into Anchorage and then take a cargo plane up to Akiak, which they usually transport sled dogs in. And then the last 30 miles, you have to go on the back of a snow machine or on a dog sled to this Yupik Eskimo village. The frozen river gets a highway number, and yeah, that's how
When you're doing these trips and to do research, you ever thought of saying, well, nobody will really know if I didn't go to this place?
David, they know. They write you. They tell you everything you got wrong.
Okay. So have you ever thought of writing nonfiction books about some of these subjects?
I get asked that all the time, and I always say no, because I feel like that would hamstring me a little bit. I think it's the flexibility of being able to shape fiction around the facts that I like. But I mean, my stuff is so carefully researched that if there is any proof to be had, I'm going to uncover it while I'm trying to make my points.
And now, have you ever heard of the pejorative phrase chick lit?
Oh, just once or twice.
So chick lit means a book presumably written by a woman for women only.
Yeah.
Now, some people have characterized your writing as chick lit,
Yep.
but that's unfair, obviously. But when somebody says you're a chick lit writer, what do you say?
I say I have to write the worst chick lit ever, because chick lit is also usually fluffy and something you want to read on the beach, and that is definitely not my kind of book. But also, I was so tired of being called a chick lit author that I started to track my fan mail, and 50% of my fan mail, I think it was 49%, came from men. So I think they'd be surprised to hear that I was writing chick lit.
Male lit and chick lit combination.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's talk about your background, how you became a writer.
Sure.
Where did you grow up?
Grew up on Long Island in a little town called Nesconset that was a suburb. I grew up with my younger brother and my parents who have moved since then, but are still happily
What
married.
did your father and mother do?
My dad worked on Wall Street. He was a securities analyst in the property casualty field, and my mom ran a nursery school.
Okay, and so you didn't learn how to write fiction from your father, security writing, right? No?
You'd be surprised. He's an excellent writer, and one of the things he used to do for like business insurance every year was to write a Christmas column that was always like along the lines of, Clement Moore, and he used to come to me and we would write these together. And I have to tell you, it's very hard to rhyme the word reinsurance recoverable.
So you went to a public high school? Or?
I did, yeah.
Okay, and you must have done reasonably well. You got into Princeton.
Yeah.
Was that your first choice?
Yeah.
All right, so you go to Princeton, and there you majored in,
Creative writing and English.
okay, and were there any other people majoring in creative writing at Princeton at the time? Everybody else wanted to be an investment banker or private equity
No,
person?
there were plenty of people.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you were there, Joyce Carol Oates was a very famous writer in residence,
Yes.
but did you ever meet her?
I did.
And was she a professor of yours?
So the way it worked in the creative writing classes, you had to give them a portfolio to be accepted into the program. And then when you got to the point of writing a thesis, you had to be accepted to write a thesis. And I actually was accepted my freshman year into the program to start taking classes. I started at the poetry level. I worked with poets, which I actually think changed my writing a lot. I think a lot of fiction writers don't focus at the line level the way that I do. And I think that's because of training in poetry. But then I started to work with an amazing writer named Mary Morris, who is still a very good friend of mine. And a semester after that, I was placed in Joyce's class. And Joyce is an American icon, an incredible writer, but she and I have very different styles. And I didn't feel as if I was getting what I needed from her in her class, so I switched out into a different class.
Okay. So you wrote a story at Princeton, as I understand it, and your professor said, well, not so bad, why don't you submit it to 17 magazine? And you did.
I did.
And what happened?
It was my first published anything. I actually sent it off. I couldn't even buy the copy of the magazine because I didn't have like the disposable income back then. So I just copied the masthead, from a newsstand, and I sent it off. And a few months later, I had an answering machine message, because that's what we had back then, saying, we'd like to pay you for your story. And at first I called all my friends because I wanted to know who was pranking me. And then I called my mom and I said, guess what? I'm going to be a writer. And she said, that's awesome. Who's going to support you? So it was a good reality check. But they wound up publishing that short story and another one before I graduated. And then, of course, I went and did not become a writer, but worked on Wall Street.
We worked on Wall
I
Street.
did, yep, until the stock market crashed in October of
So you
'87.
were an analyst or investment banker? Or
Yeah, I was working at Solomon Brothers in commercial paper, and they hired me to write the bond offering circulars for Standard & Poor's and Moody's. And there was a point where I knew more about fiat than like anyone on the planet.
And you think there's a lot of fiction in what they put in the prospectuses?
I don't think it was meant to be fictional, but it was definitely not right for me. I have to say the stock market crashing was probably
So
a
the
good
stock market crashed in October of '87.
Yep.
So were you laid off? Or?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we all
Okay.
got severance packages. I bought a car and I moved to Massachusetts.
So you decided to become a writer.
Yeah, no, I did not. Because, my mom was still saying, you got to support yourself. You got to support yourself. So I actually wound up working for an educational publisher, Allen & Bacon. And I was hired to be a business textbook editor with my massive 3 months of experience in the business world. And I used to do all my editing in the morning and then close my door and pretend to be very busy and instead write my novel. And I did that for a couple of years. Then I worked for a one-person advertising agency. I was writing copy. And at the same time, I was getting a master's in education.
At Harvard?
I was at Harvard, yep. And then I taught 8th grade English. And during that time, I also got married and I got pregnant and I left to go have this baby. And my first book was published shortly after my first son was born.
Okay, so when you're doing all these things, you're getting your degree, you're getting married, you have a baby. How do you have time to write a novel?
You make the time. I mean, I've known writers who have full-time jobs and get up at 4 in the morning, write for 2 hours a day before they go on and do their employed jobs. And I think that if you are a writer, you can't not write.
Do you ever have a thing called writer's block?
I don't believe in writer's block.
You don't believe in it?
No, because think about it. When you were at college and you had writer's block, didn't it just miraculously clear up the night before the paper was due? Writer's block is really having the luxury of time to stress over something. And if you don't have time, you sit down and you write. And you can always edit a bad page, but you cannot edit a blank page.
Okay, so you write your first novel, and how was it received?
Well, I mean, the 3 people who bought it must have loved it.
But did it sell a lot or not that much?
Oh, it didn't sell very much. It was with Faber and Faber, which was a huge company in England, but they were coming to America for the first time. And in a way, that was a blessing for me because they made my little book their lead spring fiction. So it got reviewed a lot, and it was reviewed well. And on the strength of that, I moved to a more commercial publishing house, Viking, for my next book. So, you know, it was, I still don't know how I wrote that book. It's a very complicated book in terms of structure. I think I had more brain cells back then, but yeah.
Look, Moby Dick didn't sell very well in the beginning either, so.
Right.
All right, so you write the first book, and then you decide, this is what I can do. And so when did you come up with the genre that we described, where you find an interesting social subject that has some complications in between people having different views on it, and decide to write a book about that subject? When did that
I
come
would
up
actually argue that that probably came in with the second book. The first book, you know, they tell you to write what you know, and I really didn't know anything when I was starting out. I had a very happy childhood. I wasn't walking around in a cloud of angst like a lot of writers, you know. I tend to be a pretty sunny individual. And so my first book was really about the relationship between a mother and a daughter, which I did know. Very fictional, not at all my life, but that was where I centered the first book. The second book was really about a woman who has a baby and can't handle it and winds up leaving to figure out who she is before she comes back to be a mother. And it was really about postpartum blues, which nobody even called postpartum blues at the time. My third book was about domestic violence. So I think that by the time I was already doing my second and third book, I was already diving into these issues.
But you sound awfully normal, whereas some of the great fiction writers, you know, Hemingway or others, they're either drinking too much or they have terrible relations with their children or their parents, but you don't have any of these problems.
No,
right?
no, I'm really quite boring. And I actually think that the reason I can write the things I write is because I don't live those lives. You know, if I were walking in that kind of darkness all the time, I think it would be hard to go to my office and live in it again, dwell in it. I would say the book that has probably been the closest to me that I've ever written was By Any Other Name. Because even with the success that I've had, which has been fantastic, I am still being judged as a female author, like you said, chick lit, you know, to have as many books in print as I have, to have the name recognition that I have in society is an amazing thing. But when I get on a plane, you know, because I'm on book tour and I sit next to a man in a business suit and they say, oh, what do you do? And I say, I'm a writer. And they look at me and they go, children's books?
Right.
Like that's the default. Children's books are romance, and that's what we assume women write, when it's not like that at all.
So when you write, do you get up in the morning and write a couple hours and then go do other stuff? Or do you write in between other things you're doing? And when you were having your children, you have 3 children.
3 kids, yeah.
How did you manage 3 children and the husband and everything else? How did you get time to write?
Okay, so first of all, I think it's important to note that nobody ever asked that of male authors.
Right.
Right? And that's an important distinction, because the reason I was able to get to this level was because of my husband, who gave up a lot so that he at one point became the primary stay-at-home dad. But when my kids were very tiny and I was the primary caretaker, I would write in any 10-minute bursts I could find. If Barney was on TV, if they were napping, I used to take my laptop to kindergarten and nursery school pickup, and while I was in line, I'd be typing, waiting.
What did the other parents think of you? They
They probably thought I was insane, but I was doing it anyway. Yeah.
so
And then you know, organized school is a wonderful thing. It's 8 hours a day. when
your
kids
children are
around.
now grown.
Yeah, they all
Right,
are.
so now, when you write today, you get up in the morning,
Yep.
and after a cup of coffee, let's say, do you start writing right away?
No, I usually get up in the morning and I swim a mile. That's how I start my day. And then I go up to my office.
Swim a
and
mile?
I do.
I try to swim a mile in a year, and it won't take me a year to swim a mile. You can swim a mile in the morning,
Yeah,
okay?
swim a mile
All right,
every
you
day.
do that, and then what do you do?
I go to my office, I take my coffee with me, which my husband makes, and then I go upstairs and I pull up whatever I've been writing, and I edit my way through the chapter, and when I get to the bottom of it, I start writing fresh.
Now, do you know, before you start a work of fiction, do you know how it's going to end?
Always.
You can't just say, well, maybe I made a mistake in the beginning a month or two ago, let's go a different direction. You ever do that?
No, because I've kind of become known for twists. And I think there's a difference between a twist and a sucker punch. A sucker punch is when someone just pulls something out of the air at the end and changes the drive of
So you
the
don't
book.
do that.
I don't do that.
Right.
What I want to do is leave you a paper trail, and that means I have to know where I'm going.
Let's suppose you write for a couple days, and then do you ever show it to your husband, your children, anybody, your mother, anybody, and say, what do you think?
What I usually do, it depends on the book, but very often if I finish a section, if it's in 3 sections or something, I will send pages off to my agent, my long-term agent, she's the only agent I've ever had, and my mom, because they give me different kinds of feedback. I also have a couple of friends who are writers, who are beta readers for me, which is really helpful because sometimes you're so in a book that you lose clarity. And it's important to get a bigger picture, I think, while you're writing it.
Let's suppose you take an issue like gender rights
Yeah,
or gender equality.
sure.
Do you have a point of view that you want to get expressed through the fiction, or do you have a view that's more agnostic? You just want to present the issues without getting the reader to kind of adopt your point of view?
So that's a great question. I never think it is my job to tell you what to think as a reader. I think it's my job to make you question why you believe what you do. Most of us kind of get our worldview from our parents, our peers, our pastors when we're very, very young, and we don't question it. So I did write a book about gender rights, basically. And in that book, I am very liberal in my outlook when it comes to gender rights. I have a gay son who is very happily married and who gave me my first grandchild. And when I was writing that book, that's actually when he came out to me while I was in the middle of writing it. And all of a sudden it wasn't theoretical, it was like I'm a mom on a mission now. But I didn't want that to be the only message in there. So I also did interviews with Focus on the Family. And I listened to them and I asked questions and I got feedback and documentation, and they are represented in their whole and gnarly truth. You can read that book and you can say they're right, or you can read the book and you can say this character's right. That's up to you.
Now, your books attract a fair amount of readers, but they also attract a fair amount of commentary from people who don't like some of the things that you write.
Yes.
And you maybe lead the league in books being banned?
I do. My book, 19 Minutes, is currently the most banned book in America.
Really?
Yep.
Okay. And so what does your publisher say when you have your books being banned, that you can't sell a lot of books when they're banned? So do they tell you to change their writing style, or they just don't interfere with you?
Absolutely not, no. I've had great publishers who've always said, you write what you need to write, we have your back. And I think that's a really important relationship for a writer and a publisher.
And your books are being banned by libraries or parents associations, or who?
Yes. So, book bans have increased 1,100% since 2020. They mostly started to increase because of parental rights laws that have been passed in some conservative states that have been misinterpreted so that parents believe that if they object to a certain book, it should be removed from a school shelf or a library shelf. And, it's one thing as a parent, I'm a parent, to monitor what your kids read. It's another thing entirely to monitor what other people's kids read, and that's therein lays the problem. That's why we're seeing huge swaths of books being removed from these states. Over 10,000 individual titles have been removed.
So when your books are banned, do you just say, well, they're banned and I'm going to go write another book, or you try to persuade people that it shouldn't be banned?
I have amazing fans and readers, and usually they do that for me. The reason 19 Minutes is banned, 19 Minutes happens to be about school shootings and gun violence in America. And you would think that might be a contentious issue, but that's not the problem with the book. The problem apparently is one page where there is a date rape scene that is not graphic and is not gratuitous and is 100% part of the commentary about bullying that is baked into the book. But that is what these parents, and particularly the group Moms for Liberty, was objecting to with that book.
Okay. So I understand. So
mature content is what
in
they
any given year, how many books do you think you can write? You write one a year?
I used to write one a year. I now write one every 2 years.
Okay. But you also now write young adults books, and I think you wrote at least one with your daughter.
Yes, that's a one-off. I've written 2 books with my daughter that were part of a series. She was 13 when she came up with the idea for this book, and I was like, that's a great idea, let's write it together. And we spent 3 years working on this book, It was published. At 16, we went on a 3-continent tour, for the book. We wound up writing a sequel when she was in college, and now she is actually writing middle grade fiction on her own, which is pretty awesome.
And she doesn't want to write any more books with you, or what?
I guess, I don't know, yeah, she's better by herself, I'm not sure, but instead of writing middle grade and YA now, the way I fill my time is by writing librettos for musicals.
So do you have, people come to you and say you've changed their views on certain social issues
Yes.
because of your books?
Yes, so often I will get emails from people saying, I never saw it that way, you opened my eyes, you made me think that maybe I wasn't seeing the other side clearly. That's why I write, it's to start a discussion. And you can't always have a discussion with people. Some people just aren't ready to hear it. But there are a lot of minds that you can change one mind at a time and get them to open up their worldview a little bit. And I think as a writer, that's what I was put here to do.
So for somebody that wants to be the next Jodi Picoult,
Okay.
and wants to be a writer, writes fiction, what do you recommend? Going to Princeton, Harvard, have parents that work in Wall Street? What do you recommend that they do?
I think the only thing you have to do is be a reader first, because you really want to know how your stories, the stories that you need to tell, are going to fit into the canon somehow. And I also think you need to take a writing workshop course. Does not have to be at Princeton, does not even have to be at a college. They offer them at libraries and at online and at bookstores. The reason I suggest taking a workshop course is because you learn how to write on demand and you learn how to give and get criticism. And those are probably the most important tools a writer has.
Now, when you were a child, did you read a lot?
Tons.
And your parents encouraged you to read?
Tons. One of my first memories is actually signing a library card.
Did you do the same with your children? You encourage them to read?
Yeah.
So when you're writing a book now, do you ever think that your style has evolved over the years, and so that if you went back and read the books you wrote 20 years ago, you'd say, why did I write that, or that could be done better, or you never do that?
So I had the chance to change those books. When I started out, I told you 3 people bought my hardcover for my first book, and eventually a later publishing company, Simon & Schuster, bought the rights to all my earlier hardcovers and said, we're going to release these in paperback. If you want to make any changes, you go right ahead. And I was like, oh, ooh, do I do that? And I went and read through all of them. And there were definitely changes that I would have made in terms of technique, as I think I've become a more skilled technical writer. For example, what might have taken me a paragraph to describe when I was writing and I was 23, I now could do in 5 words. But I stood by the stories, I stood by the characters, I stood by the plots. I thought those were all, they absolutely still worked to me.
When you're reading just for pleasure yourself,
Yeah.
who do you like to read?
Oh, I read so widely. I'll read fantasy when I'm writing because it's so different from usually what I'm writing. I read a lot of first-time authors. I blurb a lot of books because I think it's really important to lift people up if you can. I read literary fiction. I read commercial fiction. I mean, really, I read almost everything except nonfiction. I only read that when I'm doing research.
But have you ever thought about trying to write nonfiction as part of your genre?
I don't think I want to. There are so many people doing great nonfiction. I don't need to do that.
Okay. So today, does your mother ever tell you that she raised you to be a successful writer and that she takes the credit for this? Or who do you give the credit to for being a successful writer?
There were so many people in my life that encouraged me to write. From my mother, who gave me that reality check, but has been my biggest cheerleader my whole life, to Mary Morris, who really whipped me into shape at Princeton and made me the writer that I am today, to the readers who were willing to follow me, even when I was writing very different books each time around. I think that there are so many influences on me, and even the writers I loved, that I read as a reader before I was a writer, who inspired me and made me want to do something just as great. Alice Hoffman was one of my favorite writers, and I love that I get to talk to her now as a friend.
So were you one of these people who was an 800 SAT in English kind of person and you were really good at that?
I was, yeah.
Yes. So have you ever kept up with any of your high school classmates who,
Yeah.
and do they say, we always knew you were going to be a great writer, or they said?
Yeah, I mean, I have a group of high school friends who I think would have told you that they could totally see me being a writer. I had a high school teacher who wound up becoming the principal in the district and then the superintendent, and his name was Mr. Eamon, and he absolutely encouraged me to write and told me I could do it. he even sent me off to college with, ironically, posters of Shakespeare quotes.
So did you ever meet Simon Wiesenthal?
I did not.
Did you write about the hunting of for former Nazis? Did you ever do that? And
Yes,
did he
I did.
inspire you to do that, or?
Yeah, it was actually, so that book was a really interesting, to me, a departure, because I had been writing a lot about things that I was afraid of as a parent, you know, like your child getting sick, your child getting kidnapped, things like that. And then my kids kind of made it through childhood, and I was like, okay, good. And I began to, I think, broaden my scope. And The Storyteller, which is the book you're talking about, was really about the nature of good and evil. And I wanted to ask the question, if you were a good person, is there something that could convince you to do something truly evil? And if you've done something truly evil, is there anything that could erase that stain? And that honestly was where that story came from for me. So I actually wound up shadowing a guy at the Department of Justice whose job it is to go after former Nazis.
Now, you wrote a book about elephants.
I did.
You mentioned it earlier. Have you ever thought, they have like in Florida, kind of an animal country safari where you can just go in Florida, you don't have to go all the way to Africa to see the elephants. Do you ever think about doing that as opposed to going all the way to Africa?
Well, I did actually go to some of the elephant sanctuaries that were in the US. There's one in Tennessee that I went to. And that was important too, because there was an elephant sanctuary element in the book. But I needed to really see these incredible animals, these matriarchal societies in the wild, which is why I went to Botswana.
So we write in your book, I think, that these elephants go back and look at the bones of,
Pick them up, yeah.
of elephants that have died, and they can kind of sense that this was their cousin or something like that. Is that right?
Yeah, well, what they do is they'll go back to a spot where an elephant died, and if there are bones there, it's really wild. They'll pick them up and with their trunks very sensitively go like this. Sometimes they'll rub their feet very gently over them. And even if there are no bones, but they know an elephant died there, they will go back there like annually and just kind of pay their respects, just like we would.
So for that kind of work, research, do you spend 1, 2, 3, 4 months researching before you start writing?
Every book is totally different, but yes, I always do as much research as I can before I begin to write. And so for that book, it was probably about 6 months.
Now, sometimes some writers research, write, or some just do research and then they write.
Yeah.
And you are a complete researcher, then you write?
I mean, I would say 85% upfront, because I usually know before I write a single word if the book is going to work, right? Because if I'm doing research and it's completely not falling the way I think it's going to, then I'm not going to write that story. That has only happened once or twice in my life.
Now, some people who are writers say, I write 3 hours a day, that's it. Or I write 2 pages a day, that's it. And when I'm done those 2 pages or 3 hours, I'm done. Is that your style?
No. I write, I think, the way I learned to write, which is in the time I have. I tend to treat writing like a job. I go to my desk. If it's 8 o'clock when I'm at my desk, I stay there till about 4 or 5. And then I magically become a mom or a wife again. And I do it that way because that's sort of how I modeled it for myself when my kids were little. I don't usually write on weekends unless I'm at the very end of a book and I just need to get there.
Why don't you write on weekends? That's when most people.
Because that's
think they
family
have
time.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about outside of writing. What do? You swim a mile every day. That's
Yeah.
pretty impressive. Are you Olympic level?
God, no, but I'm very steady.
Okay. So what do you do outside of writing? You obviously have children, grandchildren.
Yeah.
But do you have other activities? Are you a collector of anything? Or what else? A hiker, tennis player, golfer?
I have a very good group of female friends that I will go hiking with. We mostly do it because we just gossip the whole way, which is really fun. But I also, we have the great fortune to live in a beautiful part of America, the Northeast. And
Let me ask you about that.
yeah.
Many people live in the area they grew up in.
Yeah.
Or they went to college in, or they worked in professionally.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Long Island. You went to school at Princeton and at Harvard. You worked on Wall Street, lived in New York, I presume, at that time. And now you live in Hanover, New Hampshire, which is where Dartmouth is. So how did you get it's a great place, but small, but great. So how did you pick Hanover?
So when we were looking for a place to live, we actually started, when I first got married, our first house was west of Boston in Sterling, Massachusetts. We just kept moving further west until we could afford to buy something. And then when my husband was working at the time, he was working as a sales manager, and we kind of brainstormed, where do we want to live? And he had a client, Dartmouth was one of his clients, and he said, I think you'd really like it up here. And we went and visited. I loved it. I loved the fact that it was a country town. It was a rural area. But because of Dartmouth College, there are arts and hospitals and terrific education and everything that you really want to surround yourself with. You don't feel as isolated. And we decided that's where we wanted to raise our kids.
So today, when you are thinking about the remainder of your writing career, it's going to be in the same genres, right? You're not going to do anything different.
No, I mean, the thing I did that is different is about 10 years ago, I started writing for theater. And I do love that because it balances novel writing so beautifully. Theater is so collaborative. There are 50 brains working with you on something, right, as opposed to being alone in your office. And I think that really feeds a very different part of my creativity. But they also, they inform each other, you know? So when I sit down to write a novel, I'm always looking around like, well, where is everybody with me? But when I'm writing for theater, I can pull from all the years I've written dialogue, you know, to be able to create.
You had shows produced for Broadway yet, or?
The first one that I worked on was an adaptation, actually, of the YA book series that I wrote with my daughter. It was called Between the Lines, and it went to the Tony Kaiser Theater off Broadway in 2022, right after COVID. Really hard time to be doing theater. Currently, we have 2 projects that are over in the UK. I'm actually headed to the West End to do a concert version of The Book Thief, which is an adaptation of Marcus Zusak's book.
And has Hollywood come calling for any of your books
Oh,
and
yeah.
said, we want to make a movie out of this or that? And what do you say about that?
Well, I did have a movie made out of My Sister's Keeper. It was the worst professional experience of my life. That has a very well-known and shocking ending, and the only thing I said to the studio and the director was that I wanted them to keep the ending, and they promised me they would, and they did not. And my fans revolted. I revolted.
Were you involved in the script writing, or?
Only in that the writer-director was the one. He would call me weekly, and he would read me pieces of things he wrote and ask for my help, and you know, and then he just turned in a script that was different from the one he showed me, and that was not fun. But since then, because my readers were so upset with the changes, the movie didn't do as well as they thought, and because I told New Line Cinema it wasn't going to do that well, I was suddenly a savant in Hollywood. So I've had more experience and more license to be creative with the projects that have come since then.
One famous writer, I can't remember if it was Faulkner or Fitzgerald, who said that when you're writing for movies, basically you throw the script over the fence, they throw money back over the fence to you, and that's
That's it. It is. It's like giving a baby up for adoption. But the reality is that if they feel that you can contribute in a way that is going to be useful and viable to them, then they'll let you, if you're lucky, contribute in some way.
So for people that don't know how a novel is evolved, let's go through this.
Sure.
You finish your draft and you turn it into your publisher. Typically your publisher says, you have a year to write, or 9 months, or how long do they give you to typically write?
The way my contracts look, it's every 2 years. Every 2 years.
2 years, okay. So you turn the draft in, and then since you've sold so many copies of your books already, does somebody have the courage to say, well,
Yes.
let me edit your work?
Oh, absolutely. My editor, Jen Hershey, is the best editor. I love her. And I think sometimes I think she cares more than I do. I mean, she really gets so passionate about my books and really wants them to be the best they can be. Like I said, sometimes you get too close to material, especially when you're writing for 9 months, you know, and you don't realize how I guess caught up in the details you are, that you can't see that big picture. And Jen is a master of that, and I rely on her to be able to look at something with baby eyes and help me shape it.
Do you imagine that Shakespeare had an editor and somebody said, well, you're not really doing such a good job, Will, and we're going to edit your work? Or,
I mean, you're assuming he wrote the stuff.
well, he probably wrote most of it, don't you think, or a lot of it? You don't think he wrote most of it?
No, I don't. I think that we would have found by this point something in his hand. And there is one play with Shakespeare's actual handwriting on it, and it's a play that somebody else wrote.
Well, if you don't think he wrote most of it, who do you think wrote it? Did Francis Bacon or?
Francis Bacon, the Earl of Oxford, Marlowe, I think it was a whole bunch of people. Thomas Kidd, tons of writers who I think were all, for different reasons, wanted to pay Shakespeare for that name. It was like a collective. And I think people knew back then that if you got a Shakespeare play, it was like a wink, you know, like we know who William Shakespeare is. It's all these people. And I think we've all lost the joke.
Well, we're in the Folger Shakespeare Library, and would you be willing to tell people here that you think Shakespeare didn't write a lot of those things?
I think he might have written some of the stuff. I think he tried to write. I don't think that he is the, I don't think he is the religion that people have made him out to be, honestly.
Okay, well, all right. So I was asking about whether somebody edited his work, but let's go back to your work.
Yeah.
So the editor comes back and says, all right, here's how some edits, and you go back and forth. Then when the book is done, do you get a certain amount of time you commit to them to go out and talk to people and promote the book a bit? Is that a month or so, 2 months?
Yeah, so I think I'm a rare writer in that I actually am a people person. And I like going out on the road. I like meeting my fans. I really like talking about my books in public. And so my tours get to be quite extensive. So I'll do like a 30-city tour in the US, which is quite large. And then I'll go over and do a couple of weeks in England, and then sometimes I'll also wind up in Australia or another country.
So when you go on these tours, how many people come up to you and say, I knew you in high school, or my daughter knew you at some point in high school or something? You have people that have personal connections? Or how many people come up to you and tell you, I don't really like your work, I just came here to tell you I don't like your work?
Nobody ever does that,
They don't
because
do
usually
that.
they have to pay for a ticket, so why would you?
They don't do
right.
that.
So, but I have had a couple of people come up to me and be like, do you remember me? I was in your 3rd grade class. But most people are, what I actually love is when people come up to me and say, I started reading your books when I was 14, and now this is my daughter, and I have her reading all your books. And you see these whole generations of families that are reading books together, and I think that's awesome.
So what you're most proud of having accomplished as a writer so far is the genre that I say you perfected. Is it just putting out a fair amount of work over many years? Is it having people tell you that they really enjoy and have had their views change on what you've written? What do you most enjoy and most proud of?
I'm most proud of the fact that all of my books are still in print, which not a lot of authors can say. They never went out of print, like not even the old ones.
Even Shakespeare couldn't say that,
That's
right?
right. And I'm also really proud of the fact that I think people tell me very often that a book saved their life at a time when they needed it. And I think that when we write fiction, we don't expect to have that kind of impact on someone, but every now and then you do. And it's not just 1 or 2 readers, it is hundreds have come up to me with stories of their own lives and how my books intersected with them. And I really do believe that the last piece of an equation when it comes to a book is the reader, what they bring to the story and what they take away from it. And that is honestly, what a gift to know that you helped someone when they needed it.
Now, one of the great nonfiction writers in our country is Robert Caro, who's written a book on Robert Moses, and also now 4 volumes and maybe a 5th on Lyndon Johnson. He wrote a book not long ago on how he writes.
Yeah.
Would you ever consider writing a book about how to write?
I don't know. I feel like if I were going to write anything like that, it would probably be a compendium of all the research that I've done and the stories I have from doing all the research. I think a book on writing is useful only in so much as you have to be able to figure out what works for you, because every writer is different and every writer writes differently. And so Stephen King's On Writing is an incredible masterclass in writing, but you may not take every lesson from there and apply it to yourself in a way that's healthy or helpful. So rather than telling people this is the only way to do it, I would rather, I think, inspire them with the joy that I've had in my writing and hope that they can find that somehow in theirs.
So writers like you are always looking for fresh ideas for new books, presumably. Do you read newspapers religiously? Do you watch television news? What do you do to get fresh ideas all the time?
They fall into your lap sometimes, I'm definitely a student of the news and of politics and of really, there's no shortage of contentious topics right now in the world. So I don't think I have to worry about that anytime soon. But I don't say I go into reading a paper or watching the news looking for the next hook, because very often it has to hit me at the right point in my life for me to want to write about it.
Does anybody ever call you and say, I have a great idea for a book, and you have to be polite to them? Or sometimes you say, hey, that is a great idea, and actually you take the idea.
Well, so interestingly, both of those have happened. I can't tell you how many emails I get from people saying, my life would be a great book and I want you to write it. And I always say, I always write back, I write everybody back, and I say, Thank you so much for thinking of me. I don't take on story ideas. I have so many of my own. But that said, if this is the story you want to write, you should do it. And here are some ways to get started, right? So encourage them to tell their own story. But that said, there have been people sometimes when I'm in the middle of organizing a book and trying to figure out research where someone writes to me and says, you know, I really am hoping you'll write about this topic. This is how my life was affected by this topic. And I'm like, you are exactly who I need to talk to. Right. And so I've wound up with, you know, prison pen pals because of that. And very often I use their stories, the lives of the people who have walked through these situations in my books in a way that I haven't, so that I can write with authority about a character.
So who's your toughest critic? Your mother,
your
not my mom. Children, your husband, or none of them? They don't criticize you that much?
I am my toughest critic at this point. You know, there is something about being a successful writer where I think people just assume, hey, they're going to buy the books anyway, you can write whatever you want. And so I don't ever want to phone in a book. I want to make sure it's the best that I can do at that moment. And so I am probably harder on myself than anybody else.
And when you are writing, let's say you write it one day and you finish it, you go back the next day and look at it, you say, oh my God, who could have written this? This is terrible.
Yeah, that happens sometimes.
And you restart all over again and you...
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes I'll scrap and go, what was I thinking? I should have just been shopping online for shoes yesterday, and, you know, just start that whole section over again.
So when you gather all your books and you have all your notes from all your books, what do you do with all these papers? Do you...
Good question. They are at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. They have my archives, and if anyone wants to, you know, do their thesis on Jodi Picoult, that's where you should go.
It's an excellent university. I'm just, how did you happen to pick that place?
Because my editor for my second book, Harvesting the Heart, at Viking, became an archivist, and she asked me if I would give my archives to them.
And how do you come up with the titles for your books?
I sometimes have the title in my head when I'm writing it, and sometimes I'm very proud of that title, and I send it off as a manuscript to my editor, and she goes, absolutely not. And you need to come up with a new title. And you know, sometimes it's hard. Sometimes they'll throw ideas out, but very much sometimes it's a 50-50 thing. I either know it or I have no idea what to call it.
And do you have people you dedicate each of your books to, and is it a big struggle for you to figure out who to dedicate each book to?
That's a great question. You know, sometimes I wonder if my family and friends are like, is this one for me? But at this point, I mean, I have the great fortune of having a lot of support, a lot of friends, a lot of great family. And so I've written enough books, too, that I've been able to dedicate them to the people I want to. The book that's going to come out in 2026 actually is going to be dedicated to my 2 grandchildren who are way too young to read it.
And you wouldn't dedicate a book to William Shakespeare, though, right?
I'm going to say no.
So when you write in English, that's your native tongue.
Yes.
But your books are translated into other languages?
Yes.
And do you ever go overseas to help promote the books? And
yeah.
And how many languages have your books been interpreted into or translated into?
I think it's like around 35 or 40 languages that they've been translated into. I certainly haven't gone to all those countries, but I've done book tours in Germany, I've done book tours in Italy, in France. They're very disconcerting because I don't speak those languages fluently, and some I don't speak at all. And so I remember being in Italy and Rome doing morning TV and completely unable to communicate which TV program I was on. And you know, there's someone in your ear translating as the anchor is talking to you, and you're trying then you're speaking in English, but you hear the translation. It's very weird. It's very disconcerting.
So very often people that buy books want to have them signed by the
Yes.
author, so you spend a lot of time doing that, signing books. And do you realize why people really want a signature by you, or do you think it just makes their life better if you actually have the book signed?
Well, it does. It actually ups the value, right? So, I mean, I understand that. And I have books that I really value that are first editions signed by the author. So for me, nowadays, what I do is usually do what are called tip-ins. So, for example, I had like 33,000 pieces of paper shipped to me by my publisher before By Any Other Name came out. And I had to sign 33,000 pieces of paper and ship them back. And they get bound into the books. So people who buy a book get a signed copy. You know, it's already signed for them. And even with that, I had to wind up signing an extra 10,000.
How long does it take you to do that?
I would do about 1,000 a day.
So is it
I watch a
Shorter
lot
to
of
write
bad
the book
TV.
or to sign the autographs?
No,
takes-
it's harder to write the book for sure. But you just put on like, a reality TV program on your iPad and you just sit there and, scroll. That's what it's
So the
like.
pleasure of writing novels for
Yeah.
somebody that's thinking of that is what? It's an unsteady, unpredictable income, really, because you can't be sure every book's going to sell. What is the pleasure of writing novels to you?
I cannot imagine anything else I would have rather done with my life. I still am amazed that anyone wants to read anything I want to write. And I know that even if nobody was reading it, I would still be writing because I couldn't let those stories just sit inside of me. They'd have to come out somehow. It's way more gratifying when people do want to read what you write. But for me, that is, the joy is that I actually am one of the luckiest people in this country because I have a job that I absolutely love to do.
So your books sell extremely well, and every one that I'm aware of has sold well, but you ever write one that just was a clunker and just didn't work, and afterward just said, why did I write that book, or that's never happened?
No, I did have books that didn't sell well, and then, I thought there was a point where I actually almost got out of writing. It was like my fourth book didn't sell well at all, and I went and I got an application for Home Depot. I thought maybe this is what I should be doing, and I found out later, as I switched publishing companies, that it had been caught in a major war between an editor and the head of the company who were feuding with each other. And the sales director came up to me and said, we were told not to bother trying to sell this book. I mean, there's all kinds of politics that goes on that you don't know about as an author. And so I did go back to writing, and I had a more successful book, and I kept at it.
So if you had a chance to interview William Shakespeare
Yeah.
and say, okay, Will, did you really write this, or what would you like to ask William Shakespeare, maybe the greatest writer? Some people would say, you would say maybe he didn't write all this stuff. What would you like to ask him?
Can you give me Amelia Bassano's address? I'd like to talk to her instead.
Really?
Yeah, I really think she was a
What would you ask her?
remarkable woman. I would ask her what it was like to be a female writer at a time when you couldn't have your words out in front of the public. And I would ask her how she managed to keep on surviving in spite of all the tragedy and hardship that she had in her life. How do you remain a fighter? And how do you make your mark in history when history is doing everything it can to erase you?
So do you have another person like her you're going to be writing about in the near future?
There are people I've thought about, but I haven't got the story for them yet, so we'll have to see.
So the publishing industry is a complicated industry. Some people say it's not the greatest investment in the world because publishers don't make that much money, relatively speaking. It's a complicated business. But generally, you're okay with the publishing industry. Your publishers have treated you well, and you're happy with the way the book publishing world works today?
For me, yes. It's so different than when I started. Self-publishing didn't exist when I started writing, and now there are so many authors that are doing that or doing independent publishing, which is kind of a hybrid. And that's a very different world from what I do. I like being in traditional publishing. I like having an army behind me to market my books, to put the books together physically and, in terms of getting them out in the world. But there are so many avenues now to publishing. So yeah, I am quite happy with the route I've taken. I don't know if I started writing now, if I would even be published. Who's to say? But I feel that I worked very hard, but I was also in the right place at the right time.
So what does your husband do now? He's not at home with your young kids anymore, so is he doing something else, or he's still at home helping you?
Oh, he's absolutely helping me. He makes my life spin. He's the anchor to the kite, and he is currently on puppy patrol. We have a new puppy, so that's taking a lot out of him. But he actually does volunteer work with our state archaeology department in New Hampshire, and he goes out on digs to try to identify and find Native American artifacts in the state.
Now, Hanover is a small town, though as some people would say it's a small college, and there are those of us who love it. It's a small town, there are those of us who love it. It's a great place. But you must be one of the more famous people living there, so can you go shopping at any place without having people ask you for autographs or something like that?
Believe it or not, there was a point where Bill Bryson, Janet Ivanovich, and I all lived in that town together. Isn't that crazy?
Wow.
I think I'm the only one left there now.
But nobody bothers you when you go to restaurants or anything? You can go
No,
shopping?
I mean, every now and then someone will come up to me and say, hi, I really like your books. But people, for the most part, are not going out of their way to be nasty in public. And I absolutely, when someone comes and says that to me, I am always unshowered and in the grocery store, and, my hair's a rat's nest. But But yeah, people are very kind.
Congratulations on a great career. It's very impressive. Nice to meet you, and thank you for coming to the Folger Shakespeare Library to do this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jodi Picoult and David Rubenstein viewed artifacts from the Folger Shakespeare Library's archive.
Hello, welcome.
Hi, how are you?
Good. So you see if this is something that rings a bell for you. You know what this is.
I've never seen an original of this.
But you know what this
Yes,
is.
this is Amelia's book, Amelia Bassano's book.
This is her book of poetry.
She was the first published female author in England. That's incredible.
1611.
Wow.
And this is,
Did Shakespeare write that for her?
this is it.
I'm going to say no.
Yes.
Wow.
To the Queen's most
Yes.
excellent majesty.
Yeah.
So,
And she had all of the prefatory poems, and they wanted her to cut them because it was too long a book. That's incredible.
to
all the virtuous ladies in general.
So there you have it.
And then we get into the really
and then
good
you
stuff.
get into the good stuff. But so much preliminary material
Yes.
in a book like this, so that everybody is properly thanked.
Well, really, she just wanted their patronage.
Of course.
Right.
You have to have funders. So
This is incredible. Oh, this makes me so happy.
excellent, excellent. There's nothing like seeing the real thing.
Yeah, that's amazing.
This particular copy, you can see this binding. This is an 18th century binding, so put on later. And decorated very specifically with the Shakespeare's coat of arms with the spear. And this is really nice because in the front of it here is a portrait of Roger Payne, who is the person who put this binding on. So this is an engraving of him at work. And then also tipped in here is the bill that he wrote for this binding. So it details his process, the condition he found the book in, and then what he did. And then,
That's really cool.
yeah. So that has traveled with this copy now through the
These
centuries.
pages are from 1623, or they're just rebound cover?
1623, and then the cover is
okay,
rebound.
I got
But
it, okay.
you can also see that, you know, this has been taken from a different leaf, inserted. All of these copies over centuries are affected in one way or another by things that have happened.
And
to
that's the only picture we know of Shakespeare, really?
This is the only picture where there's some reason to believe that people who knew him and worked with him were involved in the creation and the approval of that image.
See more with Jodi Picoult and the Folger Shakespeare Library's artifacts on America's Book Club, The Treasures, available at cspan.org/abc and C-SPAN's YouTube page.